Colonialism on the African continent was enabled by a range of different forms of technology, including the gun to conquer the land, the mine to extract minerals and raw materials, the train to transport both resources and migrant workers, surveillance technology to control populations. However, technology was also a tool of resistance. Shortwave radio, posters, music and songs, encrypted communication systems all played an important part in struggles for liberation. Rarely are Africans taken seriously as makers or active users of technology. Against this historical background, the 4 papers in this panel examine how Africans create, use and imagine digital technology. Sophie Toupin asks what the relationship is between the South African national liberation struggle and digital technology. Nikoi examines Ghanaian hip-life music and digital videos as sites of decolonial praxis. Mare asks how social media in Southern Africa are influenced by the post-colonial state and platform owners. Wendy Willems asks how histories of colonialism and independence struggles have shaped socio-technical imaginaries of the 4th Industrial Revolution in South Africa.
Hello, welcome. My name is Sophie Toupin. In this short video presentation, I offer some thoughts on how to understand the relationship between the South African national liberation struggle and digital technologies. To answer this question, I briefly focus on the history of the African National Congress Technical Committee, which was responsible for developing an encrypted communication system during the final years of the South African anti-apartheid struggle. The system allowed freedom fighters and their international comrades on the ground in South Africa to communicate secretly and transnationally with the ANC leadership in Lusaka, Zambia, via Bristol and London in Great Britain. The system was then extended to Amsterdam, Harare, Zimbabwe, the indigenous reserve of Tallcree in the province of Alberta, Canada, and the city of York in the UK. This presentation and its findings emerge out of my PhD dissertation, which involved semi-structured interviews and archival work. So the idea to use transnational communication to support the liberation struggle emerged in the late 1950s. It is the launch of Sputnik 1 that inspired the technical committee in pursuing science and technology for the liberation of its people. Over 3 decades, the ANC Technical Committee experimented with a number of technological devices to support the struggle. As a result, they came up with a sophisticated computer system based on heterogeneous forms of technologies, including telematics and the international phone system to communicate. To work properly in all its locations, the system had to adjust to the infrastructural scarcity and conditions on the ground in places like Zambia, South Africa, and Tallcree. Further, the system relied on a physical, technical, and people-based infrastructure where international solidarity was key to its well-functioning. The communication system was not used to compete against other nations or to gain market dominance. It was used to further liberation from a white supremacist regime, and it ceased to exist once the apartheid regime fell. Paradoxically, it is because of their experiences with advanced technologies during the liberation struggle that the post-apartheid government, and particularly the South African police, military, and intelligence agency, came to understand and appreciate the power of new technologies and use them to spy on the poor, the workers, and the student. Thank you very much.
Welcome, my name is Nikoi. This presentation explores how hip life, a transcultural musical form developed from US hip hop and Ghanaian high life, takes up digital space. Hip life making increasingly produces digital spaces which are often independent from hegemonic social spatial arrangements that exclude many in post-colonial Ghana. As such, how does hip life occupy digital space, and what possibilities are created for producing decolonial sensibilities and hence decolonial identities? The struggle to decolonize is also a struggle to reclaim and remake space that allows the colonized to thrive. Here, I draw attention to the everyday micropolitics of digital making, which can make legible strategies that challenge what Annabel Keanu calls coloniality. This project follows work that understands cyberspace as transforming pre existing social spaces. This presentation also emerges out of a larger project examining hip life cultural production through a qualitative analysis of music videos, social media profiles, and interviews of artists, as well as participant observations. Today, cultural producers involved in hip life employ internet technologies in several ways which reshape sociospatial relations. Rappers leverage social media for income and reproducing their brand by cultivating an audience online. Several artists still live with their parents, and the income allows them some economic independence, which helps reduce conflict from parental pressure to pursue conventional occupations. Artists share their music videos on YouTube partly because of the social and economic barriers to accessing television platforms, who sometimes request monies to air videos. An organizer of models once informed me that she uses WhatsApp groups to share casting calls and manage a team of models, essentially creating a virtual agency. Hip Life music videos also allow artists to visualize the worlds they create in their music and invite viewers to inhabit those spaces. For instance, through positive representations, artists challenge narratives of Africa as a place of negation. Examining audience comments, one observes a sense of pride for some of these representations which help engender diaspora reattachment to the nation and the continent. Also, the presence of the rapper's art and embodied self expression trouble questions about young people's place in the society, often questioning the various spatial arrangements that exclude many young people from national conversations. Recently, when young Rastafarian teens were denied admission to the elite Achimota school because of their hair, artists like Reggie Rockstone posted images of themselves with their locks and critiqued the racist colonial practice of exclusion around black hair. In these ways, hip life cultural producers are shaping how young people understand their place in post colonial Ghana. At the same time, they are building digital communities inhabited by their fans in ways that produce new identities. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining me. My name is Mare. This presentation critically examines how social media are influenced by the post-colonial state and platform companies in Southern Africa. As we all know, social media are increasingly playing an important role as intermediaries, protest drums, choreographers, public squares, and alternative civic spaces for the mobilization, coordination, and dramatization of social protest. Like in other contexts, young protesters in Southern Africa who feel marginalized from the mainstream public sphere have taken to Facebook, Twitter, WhatsApp, and YouTube to speak truth to power. In this particular paper, I look at the diverse ways in which cyber and hashtag movements such as this flag, Tajamuka, Roads Must Fall, Fees Must Fall, Zuma Must Fall, Naked Protest, Muswati Must Go, and Shut It All Down have creatively appropriated digital and social media platforms in order to contest and speak out against injustices which are occurring within the underbelly of the post-colonial state, which in most cases is seen as uncaring, not listening, and at most incompetent. I also problematize the arbitrary use of terms such as independence, free speech by youth activists to justify the circulation of hateful speech, disinformation, and violence on social media platforms. I question also the normalization of retrogressive politics in the name of independence and free speech. Building on existing literature around incompleteness of things and beings, incompleteness as the order of things as theorized by scholars such as Nyamjo 2018, as well as the concepts such as power and counterpower as theorized by scholars such as Quran. This paper seeks to question to the accounts that are often deployed by cyber optimists. I argue that social media activism is constrained by what I call political and techno infrastructures. The state and platform power coalesce in complex ways, which negates the so-called independence associated with social media platforms. In conclusion, in this particular paper, I argue that social media platforms are caught up within webs of control structures, which makes them vulnerable spaces to state and corporate surveillance, selective deplatforming of alternative voices, and state-ordered internet shutdowns, which also makes it very difficult for activists to realize their goals. Thank you so much.
Welcome, my name is Wendy Willems, and in this paper I frame South Africa's policy discourse around the Fourth Industrial Revolution as a post-colonial socio-technical imaginary. I treat this discourse as a national imaginary which is shaped by longer histories of colonialism and liberation struggles and which responds to larger global contexts. The COVID-19 pandemic has accelerated the push for the adoption of Fourth Industrial Revolution technology, with the World Economic Forum as an important driver in this regard. And South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa enthusiastically embraced the World Economic Forum's agenda when he took office in February 2018, suggesting that it was a development that was both inevitable and desirable, expected to reap positive benefits for the country while redressing the inequalities that apartheid produced. So a number of institutions were set up to help coordinate the Fourth Industrial Revolution, and universities were quickly accorded an important role in implementing the agenda, carrying out research, and providing students with the required skills. So in this paper, I carry out a critical discourse analysis of government policy documents, government speeches, and think tank policy reports. So I ask a number of questions. What does the Fourth Industrial Revolution mean in the specific context of South Africa? How has colonialism shaped the nature of this socio-technical imaginary? How does this imaginary engage with the legacy of colonialism and apartheid and notions of freedom and independence? What problems does technology promise to address? And in the paper, I argue that South Africa's policy discourse manifested a tension between disavowing colonial claims about Africa as the absence of technology and embracing a journey towards readiness for a Fourth Industrial Revolution delivered by external forces. For example, policy documents presented the Fourth Industrial Revolution as a succession to earlier technological contributions of pre-colonial states, such as the Mapungubwe Empire, a southern African state located in present-day South Africa, Botswana, Zimbabwe, and Mozambique, which made significant advances in the area of gold mining in the 12th century. However, the focus on preparedness in much of the discourse around the Fourth Industrial Revolution implied that it was a period of technological change that was brought onto South Africa instead of driven by the country endogenously. And this particular discursive position reflects the material limitations of South Africa within the global economic order. Ultimately, my paper highlights that independence remains constrained by a neoliberal imperative driven by the World Economic Forum and other international financial institutions. Thank you. In this panel, we have treated digital technology as potential tools of liberation and as spaces for reflection on what it means to be independent. We would now like to raise 4 questions to provoke further discussion. First, how can the history of the pre-internet be more inclusive of the contribution made, for example, by national liberation and anti-colonial movements? Second, how do we stay attentive to the everyday micropolitics of socio-spatial struggles extended by digital technologies while being alert to the ways post-colonial governments enact digital repression? Third, as internet scholars, how can we decolonize the study of social media-enabled activism in ways that does not reinforce the coloniality of knowledge, power, and being? Fourth, if we take seriously both the history and afterlife of settler colonialism globally, how does that change the nature of the story that has so far been told about digital technology?
Was